in. Here's the break on. It's Ian Durant. Through to Haitley. McCoist on the far side. Gary Speed is racing back to provide the cover. Here's Ali McCoist. Oh, he's done it! Ali McCoist for Rangers. Here's Gascoigne now. Can he produce some magic? Still it's Gascoigne. Oh, yes! A tremendous goal by Gascoigne. It's been very evenly balanced. Here's Gascoigne now. Pushing forward. Showing great determination. Oh, he's done it again!
There's a slip by O'Neill. And Laudrup to win. Rangers look for a goal and get one! In the 8th minute from Brian Laudrup. Celtic's wall is 5 strong. But Alberts gets it through! The hammer has torn Celtic apart.
It's Barry Ferguson! Oh yes! The captain shows the way! Here now is Neil McCann. Is there going to be a twist in the tail? Lovenkrands! Yes, there is! Peter Lovenkrands! It had to be him! He has surely won the Scottish Cup!
Like this, here's Davis, put in by Darshville. Davis! Darshville! They've nicked it! Away from home! Manchester, brace yourself. Rangers are coming!
Bit of stoppage time. Kevin Thompson's corner. It's Bagheera! Borat stops it. Boyd! Edu has put it in! Boris Edu! Right at the end!
There's no doubt Vice has made an impact since he has come onto the park. Jelavic is it back. It's Jelavic for Rangers! It's got it!
Jelavic on to Davis, and Lafferty's in already! He scored! Inside the first minute! Luco, definitely a threat! Still going! That is just brilliant! A goal for Luco! A goal for the fans! A goal for the cause! Here's Mackay. Barry Mackay! Looking to make it happen here. He might just do that. Ryan Jack! Deflected off Brown! And in!
And Gulacsi was missing, and there's Lundstrom! John Lundstrom with the goal! But here's Joe Aribo, a slip from Tutan, Aribo! A bolt from the blue! Joe Aribo! Hello there, good evening and welcome to your Sunday night podcast. This is Ibrox. If you're joining us on your Sunday night tonight at 8 o'clock, as always, we appreciate it. And of course, you are very welcome. My name's Scott Paterson. I'll take you through for the next hour or so, where there's quite a bit to discuss, as you'd probably expect after a weekend in the world of Rangers. We discuss the victory at Livingston yesterday and the headlines that came from that. We also have a wee bit of chat to discuss on our captain, James Tavernier, who of course is getting closer and closer to a very special accolade that not many have made at the football club, clearly not many right back. And we also do a little bit about the Hall of Fame, which is being introduced or reintroduced tonight after some time off. And of course, it ties in very nicely with the reintroduction, or the opening rather, of the Gala of Edmiston Howe, which is going on right now at Ibrox Stadium. Joining me on the podcast tonight, it's good to have Adam Robertson on. Hi, Adam, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks, Scott. Good to be back on.
Not had you on for a while. You've been hiding, or just very, very busy? You've got a very busy day job, we have to say, don't you?
Yes, no, that is true. But no, glad to be back. I get usually that stressful watching them that it's hard to kind of put it into words afterwards. So I was glad that it was a 3-0 comfortable or fairly comfortable victory at the weekend. Makes this a wee bit easier.
Indeed. And joining us again, it's good to have Saf back on a Sunday. Hi, Safdar, how are you?
I'm well, Scott. Good to see you as well. Yeah, looking forward to having a chat for about an hour or so.
Yes,
Good
yes. So
banter as well, I hope.
yes, indeed. Loads to discuss tonight. As I say, Livingston and James Tavernier and the Hall of Fame police are going to someone's door. We can hear in the background. If you are getting involved tonight, don't forget to jump into the chat. We will get to your comments if we possibly can. We will be looking for your suggestions, who you think should be indeed introduced to the Hall of Fame discussion tonight. I reckon there's a chance Alan McGregor and Stephen Davis will be in with a shout of being one of the three that are inducted tonight, and deservedly so. First of all, let's wind it back to yesterday afternoon, a Saturday afternoon kickoff, 3 o'clock away from Ibrox. Adam, we'll start with you. One of my main concerns going into the game was whether we would see any of Cantwell or Rask, and I certainly never expected to see both on that horrible surface, but we did, and I thought they were both excellent yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement, Scott. I mean, I have to say I was a wee bit nervous going into the game as well. Just obviously the plastic pitch, you always kind of have concerns about injuries, etc., especially when it's a new player that everybody's excited about, and you don't want them to get injured just straight after coming to the club, but also just coming off the back of that 2-1 home victory against Ross County, and then also a kind of quite chaotic 3-2 against Partick Thistle, admittedly with a lot of changes. But just on Raskin and Cantwell, yeah, they both coped really well, played well. I think only based off highlights, but I believe was Raskin man of the match, or he was certainly one of the better players anyway.
I mean, he was certainly, as you listen, you're absolutely right. He was one of the ones that I think came out with quite a decent amount of plaudits. The big thing for me is that I don't think, and I'm sure I'm wrong, but I don't think Saf, I don't think there will be many times where these boys will have played on that sort of stodgy, rubbishy surface. It was almost a blessing in disguise that it peed down with rain because the ground was a wee bit slicker for them to play their game on.
Yeah, I was going to say that as well. I think the climate and the conditions kind of helped somewhat. Clearly, they're early into Scottish football in terms of technically as well. Clearly, that's a bit of a sea change from where they've come from as well. So clearly, that's a challenge, and the surface doesn't help. Livingston, as we know, can be a bit of a horrendous surface and/or fixture, typically historically for many teams. And it was good to kind of just get that in the bag and just continue the good run that we've had with Michael since he's kind of joined us, just taking the box.
Saf, I'll stick with you because one name that was glaringly obvious as not being involved yesterday was Malik Tillman. We knew we were going to be missing Lundstrom. We knew that Jack had a problem. Tillman missing yesterday with such a big game coming on the horizon this time next week. That's got to be a bit of a concern, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, a concern, but also a positive. Fingers crossed. I watched the press conference afterwards, and Michael was saying that it's touch and go with the three of them, the ones that you just mentioned, Scott. So let's see how the week progresses. But he missed out, as we know, as we said, it's a difficult surface, conditions, slippery and all the rest of it. He's been playing great for the last few weeks, being exceptional, kind of leading the line, being creative, and hopefully that's something that we can look forward to in the coming week, where he's fully fit again. And for I think we certainly would lead him for next week.
Absolutely, and Teddy Bears, I think, sort of says something that we can all buy into. Livy pitch is an embarrassment. Surely, if clubs want to use AstroTurf, then it has to be newer than 2G or gravel. As I argue, it is there or thereabouts. So don't forget, if you are watching us tonight on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, get involved, and we will flash your comments up. Particularly if they're good ones. If there are any rotten ones, I'm quite happy not to bring them up, to be perfectly frank. However, if you want to get involved, please make a point of doing that. So yesterday, I thought in the first half we played really quite well. I didn't think there was really any real threats from Livingston. They of course had a good chance after we went 1-0 up. Before we get to that, Fashion Sakala came in, Adam, and had a really good chance for him to be probably a little bit sharper. He's looking along the line. He should never get caught offside there.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, Scott. You cut out for a wee minute there, but I'm assuming with the frustrations of Fashion Sakala, you can tend to sort of fill in the blanks of what has happened. If there's ever a player that shouldn't be offside, you would think it would be somebody as quick as him. But yeah, I mean, obviously we thought we were off to a kind of really good start there. The linesman flagged it pretty quickly, and when we seen it back, it was one of those ones that are very obvious. It's not the kind of thing that happened at Hearts a few weeks ago when I think it was, incredibly tight. It was hard to perhaps blame Fashion Sakala against Hearts. Obviously, he was offside, but it was very fine margins in comparison to yesterday. But, another player who, since Michael Beale has come in, has just looked so much sharper. And yes, I know it's kind of pointless to perhaps say, it's good that he's getting in those positions if they're offside positions. But I think, honestly, it was better than perhaps what we were seeing before. And yeah, I do think Teddy Bears is quite spot on there. I mean, he is a frustrating player. We've known that. And I think, don't really know if it's something we'll ever be sort of rid of in that sense, in terms of, if he's just that kind of player. But what he offers, I think, can be such a positive. He's so quick and can be so electric when he gets going, and particularly against, we've seen the damage he did again in the Old Firm when he won that penalty. I mean, out of pretty much nothing, if I remember correctly. So, frustrating, but just kind of classic Fashion Sakala, I think, at this point.
I have to say, and I know we refer to the WhatsApp chat a lot on these podcasts for This Is Ibrox. Saf and Adam, I think it's fair to say you guys are quite sensible and don't get involved a lot in said chats. However, if you do catch my opinion on Fashion Sakala in there, it'll be quite clear that I'm not a huge fan of him. And yesterday I was really surprised to see that lack of maybe awareness. I looked at it again a couple of times and I thought, I wonder if he has almost just been too quick and he's just not had the presence of mind to make sure he is sort of onside prior to finding himself offside almost. But again, I would argue at his age it's something he should never be able to do. Listen, Saf, we took the lead, and I have to say I felt the goal that we got was I was really surprised that the ref never gave a penalty in the first instance. I'm surprised that they had to go to VAR for it. The pull at the back from we've lost Saf. Adam, stay where you are. I was he's had enough. I was a little bit surprised at the pull at the back post wasn't by David Dickinson, the referee. I thought it was quite obvious that it absolutely was a penalty and it should have been given there and then.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy when you watch it back to sort of think that is a little bit harsh, but then when you kind of strip it back to just the basic rules of the game, he's got a hold of his shirt. There's 0 attempt to play the ball. Yes, he's not like sort of got a hold of Morellis' shirt and physically hold him to the ground. Admittedly, would probably be quite difficult with someone that built like Alfredo Morellis. So yeah, kind of with you, Scott, I suppose maybe the only thing I can think is that although this probably isn't necessary, they've maybe just thought, let's just go to VAR and sort of triple check this. I guess maybe the ref has seen it, but he knows he's got VAR there. Who knows? But yeah, I think there seemed to be a bit of controversy about it. And I suppose perhaps the controversy comes from the consistency in that sense, because we have seen in games in the past players getting shirts pulled or not pulled. It's happened to Rangers. Rangers have probably got away with it a few times as well, and it's not getting given. So perhaps that's where the frustrations come in. But I think by the laws of the game, if that happens next week, and Connor Goldson does that to somebody, touch wood, probably shouldn't say next week, a couple of weeks' time, then it has to be given as a penalty. So I think that's perhaps where the frustration comes from. But yeah, by the rules of the game, it's pretty spot on from Scott Mitchell there. It's a really clear target. It's a penalty.
Yeah, Scott Mitchell, friend of the show, player stops Morelos from competing for the ball with a tug, a very clear tug. Saf, I assume you, like I, was very surprised that it wasn't given immediately as a penalty.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised, but then I kind of understood maybe why. Because while there was a bit of a pull, it wasn't really a massive stretch. There was a touch, there was a pull, there was a tug. I think he just wanted to make sure to have that double check, I guess, in his own mind, that it was significant and it wasn't just kind of a touch of the hand or whatever, and the penalty was given. I mean, that's what was good about VAR. I mean, that's why we've got VAR, to give that second review on it and to make sure that it was definitely a penalty. Typically last year that would have been missed, and we wouldn't have had that goal at all. So it's good to see VAR working for once in our favour and correctly as well.
Yeah, listen, you're absolutely right. Of course, James Tavernier stepped up. After missing his penalty last week, I was maybe a little bit surprised about seeing him taking it yesterday. However, I think it shows a captain's responsibility, which is absolutely what we want. Thrashed at home, and his 50th penalty for the club, Adam. And listen, we're going to come on to James Tavernier a wee bit later in the podcast about how history will look back on him in, say, 5-10 years' time, how he will be rated, and it'll stir a lot of, is he our best right back, which I get and I understand. I think it will certainly split a lot of the support. However, for him to get the penalty and tuck it away as comfortably was, it certainly looked like he had any risk of last week's miss at Ibrox in his head is absolutely out of there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think he's quite a mentally tough player in that sense. I know he went through a phase, can't quite remember when it was, where slightly edgy on the penalties after obviously a very good run. But
yep.
I think recently we're at the point where if he misses one, it kind of is a surprise. And, when he steps up to take the next one, I don't think it's really that big of an issue. I think he's very mentally tough, as I said, in that sense. And yeah, most times he steps up, I think you just expect him to score. Obviously, when you're watching it live, you can't help but go that way. But when you look back, you think, well, yeah, he was always going to score that. So yeah, and a good penalty as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, immediately after that, Saf, Livingston had a really good chance to draw level, long throw, which I have to say the defence, Goldson and Davies didn't deal with well at all, and it bounces right out to the back post, and James Penrice, the Livingston left back, really has a bit of a scuff at it. If that happens against a better team, it's one each, isn't it?
I mean, that's the risk, isn't it? When you go one up and you're kind of you're playing okay, but not great. There's always a chance that they're going to go up. As you know, three months ago, they would have scored. That was the kind of game that we were drawn under Gio, under that kind of form we were having in the first half of the season. But yeah, I mean, they had some chances. They had a few. Clearly, that was one. He scuffed at it. Didn't really get it in target. Didn't really get any weight behind it or control. And luckily, it wasn't any danger. But yeah. I mean, that's going to happen. And luckily, we kind of nullified a lot of that during the game. I think there's another chance in the second half as well, late on, or midway through the half. But it wasn't too bad. But you do want a little bit of control. More, we were having decent possession, but without doing too much in the first half, notwithstanding the penalty. And you do want a bit more element of scoring or certainly control around that.
And listen, Curry Muncher jumps into our chats on YouTube, a couple of chances in 90 odd minutes. You can't complain about the defence. And listen, I think that's absolutely right. And what you are seeing just now is that that consistency of Goldson and Davies is working. I think yesterday I was maybe a little bit concerned and surprised indeed that the throw-in comes from one end of the pitch and ends up at the other, and Livingston do have a good chance from it. Adam, last chance of the first half that came to us that I really want to speak about, just because I don't know if you'll know if Ryan Kent was offside or not, because not many people I spoke to is able to tell me if he was. Wonderful pass from Todd Cantwell, who I thought looked brilliant all afternoon, I have to say. Great pass across to Kent. And he gets he gets absolutely nailed in the box. And there's a bit of humming and hawing after that. And I don't think anyone really is understanding if the refs went to VAR for a penalty, if he's went to VAR for it to be offside. I don't think even now we know if it was given for offside or not. And any of the angles that I've seen certainly remain a wee bit inconclusive. Any idea yourself?
Yeah, so, I mean, purely based on sort of the only logical conclusion I could draw from seeing it back on the highlights is, I mean, it's a sensational ping from Cantwell to Kent. I personally think that if Ryan Kent is not offside, then it's probably a penalty, because it is quite clumsy. He does sort of clatter into him. I know you could maybe argue it's a coming together and then we get into the whole, is it clear and obvious, etc. But in my opinion, it is clumsy and it would be a penalty. So yeah, it was a fantastic ball. And as I say, Scott, I don't think we know at this moment in time, but my only thinking is that Ryan Kent was offside, because then there's surely more debate around it. I mean, it was very tight though, I have to say. I mean, watching it back, it was one of those where, you just hate seeing it on the replay because his, left kneecap's offside. But yeah, that's my kind of understanding of the situation. Trying to draw logical conclusions from Scottish football is hard at the best of times, but the introduction of VAR, I think that's hit a new level, really. So.
And, I'm going to be a bit facetious, Saf, but ordinarily in a situation like this, you would look for a line in the grass to see if he's offside or not.
That's right.
Of course, there's no danger of you doing that yesterday at all, is there?
That's right. I mean, for me, clearly it was obviously, it would have been an offside, otherwise it was a clear penalty. For me, what was interesting about that run of play was the pass. It was just a beautiful pass on that surface that got Kent some space to maybe do something, and clearly he was brought down, offside or not. And if Cantwell's going to be doing that regularly, we're into some really interesting times, interesting plays. Also, Goldson can do that. We've really lacked somebody that can do that, kind of killer pass, range it out, and make some space. And hopefully, for me, that was just so good to see that happening for once.
And Saf, I'll stick with you because one player who I thought looked really, really comfortable in the first half with a fantastic range of passing out with Cantwell was Nico Raskin. I thought he was excellent in the first half, really relaxed his way through the game, very composed on the ball. He's what we've been missing for a long time now, isn't he?
Exactly. I mean, for somebody that's really just joined us recently, as you know, come from Europe, Scottish football, as I said at the start of this pod, it can be a bit hurly-burly, a bit getting used to. It takes time for people to adapt to the environment, especially that surface as well, as we know. He did great. He adapted really well. Even last week against Thistle, he played his part. He seemed to have clearly Beale and his team have done their homework, as we know, for a number of months in terms of tracking him and how he's going to fit into our state of play and the system and whatnot. And he seems to be a bit of a gem in terms of coming in, blending in really well. And fingers crossed, he'll just grow and continue as part of the team and add a lot of value, certainly next Sunday and going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, I felt that he was really impressive. For the 90 minutes, I thought the first half he was particularly good, but for the 90 minutes, for longevity of that period of time, I thought he was really, really good and clearly a player to be excited about. At a time when Ross Wilson gets a bit of a doing, I have to say his January transfer window was really good. Second half, we come out the second half. Ryan Kent goes clean through. I think the ball takes a bobble just in front of him, Adam, as the Livingston goalkeeper George comes out to him. I think ordinarily if it is on grass again, he probably takes the ball round him and Rangers get their second of the afternoon. Wasn't to be. He had a good game yesterday. I think we're looking at a player now who every time you see him, you're almost wondering, are we going to get an announcement next week with Ryan Kent? Is something going to become clearer about Ryan Kent? Is he going to be around? Is he not? And do you know what I mean? With each passing week and you hear nothing, it's easy to think that the news may not be good, but I think you've got the Connor Goldson situation from last summer to cling on to a little bit, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, the way they did that Goldson announcement, and I think we were all, pretty resigned to the fact. I mean, I think might remember even speaking on this podcast, kind of doing a sort of, wishing him well, basically, and thanking him for what he done for the club, because it really was kind of out of the question. I think, in my head, maybe that's just sort of being pessimistic. You just wonder if lightning's going to strike twice in that sense. I don't know if they would do that again. But then the kind of funny thing is, from what I can, what I've been reading, and you have to kind of take every transfer rumor with a pinch of salt, but he doesn't seem to have been linked with a huge amount of pre-contracts or anything like that. So he obviously, seems very happy at Rangers. He's well liked. He's got a coach that clearly really values him. And since, moving on from Giovanni Van Bronckhorst to Michael Beale, he's taken on a slightly different role, been really freed up basically, and just kind of utilising the talent that he has. So you would hope from a personal point of view, it's hard to see any reasons why Ryan Kent would want to leave Rangers. I suppose it's just the kind of administrative side that needs handled in that sense, whether it's money, whether it's Rangers thinking differently. I don't know what it is. Obviously, nobody will know apart from the player and the club. So, yeah, we just have to kind of hope that he stays, and maybe Rangers, maybe that's just their thing now, just keeping us on tenterhooks with players that we really value till, pretending they've gone, and then he'll be staying. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I don't know. Do you guys think it will be a sort of similar situation to Goldson where we'll find out like right in the summer, or do you think it will be a like just random week sometime?
Do you know, I've got to be honest. I think as far as Ryan Kent's concerned, I think he will sign on again, to be perfectly honest with you. But I think it'll be another little while before we indeed find out if he's staying or not. I personally think he will sign again, and I don't think you can underestimate the effect of having Michael Beale in, to be perfectly honest. I think that Beale spoke publicly about how he's known Kent for years. He's trained him for a very long time. I think there's a good chance that Ryan Kent signs on again. Morelos, I think, is gone. I think mentally looks like he's ready to go elsewhere as well, to be perfectly frank. I think he will leave. Saf, where are you on that? Do you think Kent will hang around?
I mean, I'm right on record as saying I suspect both will leave
Right.
end of this season, end of the season's contract. The reason I say that is because, see, nowadays players have so much power, especially if they come out of contract. They get offered a lot of money to sign, whether that's a signing on fee, whether that's enhanced wages because of the fact that there's no transfer fee involved. So it's very hard to turn down. And last season, I think Golson's was an exception. We all expected him to leave. I don't know what it was. Was it mid-June or something? We got that announcement that he signed another 4-year contract, and we were all happy with that because we expected him to leave. And I suspect that will happen with these two. But as you say, Scott, Ryan seems to be happy. He's had a new lease of life since Michael's joined us the last 2 and a bit months. He's got that personal connection from from very young age, very, very young age. If we offer him enough money, money talks. He may well stay and go again, whether that's for more European success and whatnot. I have no idea. I just know that there is a lot of money at stake when players are out of contract, just because of the nature of the fact the lack of transfer fee, and you can then more or less pass, whatever it's 2-3 million to the player himself immediately, and not many people will turn that down. It's life enhancing money, so even at that kind of level as well.
And listen, a very interesting Rangers on Tour jumps in the chat. With so many players who are coming to the end of their contracts, Kent won't sign a new deal until those deal expires, as we still have a wage structure to assumably stay within, which I completely agree with, of course. It's quite right. And we should flash up a comment from Miss Stubborn, who's had a busy week. The Scottish game doesn't suit Kent's game, and he's better when he has space to run into, which of course is absolutely right, and indeed plays to his main strengths, which is popping the ball behind the sort of fullback and running into space. So listen, absolutely right. Roof came on for the second half, had a great chance and fired wide very shortly after coming on. I think it was one of his first touches, actually. And Roof was indeed fouled for the free kick, which led to Livingston having a man sent off, and the Rangers being awarded a free kick, which we'll come to in a second. Adam, did you think it was a second yellow for Omiyongo to get sent off?
Yeah, I've been kind of swithering on this one big time. I think it is a little bit harsh.
Yep.
Sort of simultaneously, if I can try and say this alongside that, I don't think it's a major scandal that the ref has given a second booking.
Yep.
As in, I think it could go either way. It is a clumsy challenge, and he's nowhere near the ball. And I suppose the kind of position on the pitch is perhaps what you could argue there, because it is kind of going to an attack. But yeah, to me, it seems a little bit harsh. But it kind of is what it is. And I suppose as well, not that football should work like this when we're having conversations about consistency, but I thought the Stephen Kelly challenge in the first half
was a shocker.
I mean, I thought that was lucky not to be a red. So sometimes these things tend to even themselves out. As I say, that shouldn't be, how it is. We shouldn't get one decision wrong and then sort of make up for it elsewhere in the game for a player that doesn't deserve it. But yeah, I think, I can see where that comment's coming from. I'll sort of be finally direct on it. I don't think it's a second yellow and a sending off, but I can see both sides of the argument.
Do you know, I have to be honest, when I saw it, so I'm entirely with you, Adam, I didn't think second yellow. However, I can see he's given the ref a decision to make by making such a clumsy challenge, as you say, in that area of the pitch, which is really, really risky. I mean, if Roof's a couple of yards ahead, it's a penalty Rangers, those 3 magic words. And listen, I think rightly or wrongly, Omiyonga was sent off. I go back to match day 1 of this season, back in, I think it was the 31st of July, and James Tavernier got a free kick in that area or thereabouts, same ground, and curled an absolute cracker in to get us 3 points. The penalty hit yesterday, Saf, was absolutely better. Straight into an area of the goal where the Livingston goalkeeper can't get near it. Really emphatic free kick, wasn't it?
It was a beautiful free kick, wasn't it? You didn't think he would go that side because the goalkeeper had it covered, essentially. So you had to get it spot on. As I say, the cliche, the postage stamp, and he did it. It was just a perfect, beautiful free kick, and well deserved. And obviously Tav does that really well. I'm sure we'll go on to discuss that in more detail. And he just settled the nerves, as you know. The guy got sent off. I agree with Adam. I think it was harsh. If I was the Rangers player getting sent off like that, we'd be going a bit crazy on here. So it was a bit harsh if you look at it from a kind of neutral point of view. But nonetheless, it was a free kick, and you're right. It's just a beautiful finish from Tav.
I think Curry Muncher's right actually here. He scored twice yesterday, one an absolute peach. Didn't have, I don't want to say crap, but he didn't have one of the best games I think yesterday, certainly. And we'll come on to him again in a little bit more depth very shortly. Don't forget, if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook or indeed Twitter tonight, get involved in the comments and we will fire them up as best we can. So last goal of the game was a little bit scrappy. Kemar Roof finds himself in a really nice area, exactly where you want your striker to be. Adam fires one into the roof of the net, and I think, and I know Rhys Cochrane from the Is Ibrox group agrees, he really puts himself into the window for leading the line at Hampden next weekend.
Yeah, I mean, the goal is like classic Kemar Roof, just right place, right time, and yeah, I would love to see him. I can understand the argument for starting against Celtic. My fear is just the injury record, and the last thing we need is to start the game with Kemar Roof and then 20 minutes in, have to change the game plan, because let's face it, we don't really have another striker quite similar to him, I wouldn't say. I know that Cholak is a kind of penalty box poacher, but I think finishing wise, Roof's probably the best striker at the club. It's just unfortunate with his injury. I mean, it genuinely feels like every time he plays, he scores. I mean, It's just that he's not played that much. I mean, obviously came off the bench against Aberdeen, he scored in the semi-final, and there the other day. So, yeah, I don't know about starting him at Hampden. I think he's certainly played himself into contention for it, but I think if you asked me now, I would probably still play Morelos, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you have with Kemar Roof, like it or not, and listen, I appreciate it's quite clear that the manager really likes him. He really fancies him. However, there is a reliability and a consistency issue there, Saf. All he can continue to do, really, is score every time he has the opportunity, isn't it?
Absolutely. Obviously, Morelos last time against Celtic, I was watching the match back today, in fact, just because I wanted to, and he had 2 or 3 good chances, which he missed. The headers in the first half, and I think in the second half as well. So he's, as you know, he's had problems scoring against Celtic historically. Kemar, is he fully match fit for the Old Firm for such a match next Sunday? I'm not too sure. Whether, I think one of the comments said we play the front that we played yesterday, and Kemar comes on maybe in the second half, midway through the second half, and mixes up a bit. Maybe that sounds like a decent option to have on the bench, perhaps. And his physicality, his directness might help then if the game is still drawing or whatever. I think I would probably go for that option, to be honest with you, as opposed to starting him. I agree with Adam. God forbid he gets injured or there's an issue there, and then we're suddenly disadvantaged fairly early on and have to change the shape soon after that.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think, do you know that way? I don't think we're actually in a bit of a quandary just now, because neither Roof, Morelos or Cholak have showed any sort of consistency that warrants them leading the line next weekend, in my honest opinion. I'd love to have one of them really playing out their skin, but we're just not having that just now. We're not seeing that just now. And while it's good that Roof did come on and score yesterday, he arguably puts himself in pole position for that position based on the fact that Morelos didn't do anything on a really stodgy surface, and Cholak was the same despite him being involved from the bench. Roof can only continue to take his chances, and we hope he continues to do that. Adam, I want to speak to you about Michael Beale. That's 10 from 11 in the league since he came in. Would have been 11 bar sort of really late Old Firm equaliser back in January. It's a really impressive performance so far from Michael Beale. 12 games to go in the league, of course, this season. I'm sure if you do the maths, we can still make that 100 points mark. Arguably, maybe still not win the league, certainly, but I think if this Rangers team get to 100 points and don't win the league, apart from saying it says a lot about maybe form across the city, it says a lot about Beale and how he's got this group of players playing really well just now.
Yeah, I mean, he's done a fantastic job. He's had a huge impact, and you look back particularly to those first two games, especially the game at Pittodrie, games that they just shouldn't really have won, to be honest with you, in terms of particularly, I mean, the Aberdeen one was like, you try not to let yourself dream that stuff like that's going to happen because it just never does, but it just shows the kind of mentality shift that you seem to have immediately. I mean, something like that you would think normally takes time. I mean, I know obviously Steven Gerrard was in a very, very different place when he first took over, but it does remind me slightly of when he first came in and there was that immediate mentality shift. Things have to be better. And Beale has kind of clearly replicated that idea, albeit that's not a surprise given that he worked under Steven Gerrard. So, yeah, and I think we're past the point now where, probably after 3 or 4 games, you're past the point where you can, describe things as the sort of classic new manager bounce. We see that all the time. We've seen it under Rangers in the past with managers, the likes of Graham Murty, when he, got a few good results and stuff when he first came in, etc. That,
and that was him.
You do just kind of get that from a manager, but I think we're well past that point now. And yeah, he's doing a really good job. And if he can make that next week, what will it be his 12th game? Did you say it was? No, it was 11.
Yeah, there's 12 to go. So far, I think, including the cup games, I'm sure he's 14 and 15 or 13 and 14. I'm not entirely sure, but from a league perspective, he certainly won 10 from the 11. Listen, it's an impressive record for a guy that came in, and there was a lot of humming and hawing with it. Is he the right person for the job? Should we be bringing him back? There wasn't particularly a right answer, I think, but I think that now that he's came in and has done what he's done, don't forget you were talking about. You're talking about a squad of players who, against St Johnstone, Livingston and St Mirren under the previous manager, looked so uninterested, just like they wanted to be playing for anyone else bar Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. For Beale to come in and do what he's done, Saf, I'll stick with you on that. He's ticking all the boxes for the support right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thinking about this a little bit as well, Scott, you can't complain. Was it 13 out of 14? Bar 10 minutes in the Old Firm, we would have a full record. And if you think about it as well, logically, going back to Adam's point about the Aberdeen away match, you winning that was so interesting. A, we won, we had that fighting spirit, and B, Aberdeen subsequently had that collapse. After that, we just went pear-shaped, and they went from hero to zero. Subsequently, and as you know, they got rid of their manager, or whatever. If we had won the Old Firm, who knows what would have happened on the other side in terms of mentality, confidence, doubt, call it what you want, okay? And so apart from that, he's had a great record over the last 2.5 months or so. So fingers crossed that continues. You made the point about the league. We've looking back at previous leagues, even at this time of the season, we would have been top, maybe comfortably. They've had an exceptional season. They've had a perfect season essentially, and it's very hard to do that consistently. So I don't think we should beat ourselves too much about that, notwithstanding the fact we always want to win the league. And maybe next Sunday, fingers crossed, touch wood, still early days. I'm sure we'll talk about it more during the week. You guys will. If we win that might be the turning point. I think Michael Beale said during the week we have a low probability of winning the league. I agree with that, but it's not zero. So let's continue to have faith as well.
Listen, it'll be very interesting to see just exactly what happens next Sunday. I do wonder if we're fortunate enough to win the League Cup final next Sunday, if it does cause a wee bit of a stagger across the city. And similar to Kemar Roof, only scoring when he gets the opportunities, Michael Beale can only continue to win games. And I think that goes for him and the sort of players that he is choosing to lead his team out every single week. Speaking of which, Adam, I want to speak about James Tavernier. 95 goals in his Rangers career, short of that magical ton. Morelos, of course, the last guy to get to 100. How kind is history going to be to James Tavernier as Rangers captain?
Yeah, personally, I think it should be very kind to him. I mean, I think it's worth me sort of prefacing this, Scott, with, the first kind of real vivid memory I have of a Rangers team is probably Walter Smith's second spell at the club. I have sort of vague memories of the likes of Stefan Kloss and Livingston, etc., but probably not clear enough to kind of make a judgment on them. So I've only kind of got really two really strong periods there. Obviously we have 2012 to kind of Steven Gerrard, basically, where with the best will in the world, I don't think many of them will come into the Hall of Fame discussion in a few minutes' time. So for me, if you were to ask me to make a 11 of Rangers players, in my own lifetime that I can vividly remember, Tavernier would certainly be in there. And, he's just given absolutely everything to the club. He's been a fantastic captain, a servant both on and off the pitch. I think he always speaks well. And, I think he's risen above, sort of trying to think of the right word, doubts from his own fans. I mean, when Steven Gerrard first picked him as captain, I think it's fair to say not everybody was 100% certain. Admitted, and I think our kind of main defence at the time was just that, if anyone knows what a captain is, it would be Steven Gerrard.
Yep.
But he's just done a fantastic job. And then you get into the actual, like quantitative part of it. His goals and assist numbers are just outrageous. I mean, even if you take out the penalties, once he reaches 100, or even say in another 10 goals time, he's reached that, 50 goals that aren't penalties. For a fullback, that's still outstanding. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to kind of put into words. And he's one Aaron Ramsey penalty away from being, one of only two people in the entire club's illustrious history to have achieved something. That ultimately, I think, sadly for him, is not on him. Obviously, that entire starting 11 that night, it's all if buts, maybes would have gone down in history, but him as the captain, I honestly struggle to say a bad word against the guy.
So, Saf, I think you and I mean this with the greatest respect, you and I are of a similar vintage, I think. If you're not early 40s, I apologise.
I'm not early 40s.
In that case, I do apologise. So so Shug has jumped in and said that James Tavernier is the best right back in his time. Shug only looks like he's in our time. He's definitely not. He includes Gary Stevens in that. I have said, I've went on record before as saying that I do think Gary Stevens is the best right back in my time. There's probably arguments for people that are older than me that will mention a certain Sandy Jardine, who of course had the flexibility to play either side. There's no doubt, Saf, that James Tavernier has been a wonderful servant to the football club. We will get another 2-3 years of him. I'm reasonably certain of that. His goal tally, as I say, 5 from 100, north of 100 assists. He is an incredible footballer and a wonderful captain for us.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Scott. I'm of that vintage where I've seen the Souness era, when Rangers had a defence and a keeper that was essentially the England defence and keeper. Yeah. Imagine that, if that was today, in terms of the quality and the quantum of money one would have to spend to do that. So I've seen that, and Stevens was an exceptional right back. So it's hard to judge, different era, physicality, etc. as well. But I think Tav himself, from where he's come from, with Rangers in terms of the lower league as well, and what he's done to bring the club up, that leadership, that spirit, that focus, and his attacking mindedness, and has been exceptional. And the reason also I say that is I spend a lot of time in London, so I've got a lot of friends that support some of the top English Premier League teams, and one thing they always say to me is the respect they have for Tav in terms of his playing style, his attacking ability, his wherewithal to get into the box, and whereas assist or goals or whatever, and as well documented in the 55 season what he did, as well as obviously the last season in the Europa League run. So I think he's up there. Whether some people have doubts because of he's not been your typical Rangers captain as well. Some people might have unconscious bias around that. I don't know, but I think he's been a great captain. for us. It's a shame, just because of the nature of the way we've come from over the last 10 years, 6 years even, that he's not won more trophies as a result. And as Adam said, he was that close to winning a European trophy with us. And I would have him in the Hall of Fame. I think he's been exceptional in that period that I've certainly seen him playing.
Do you know GS jumps in to the chat via YouTube? Thanks for watching tonight. He does comment, and I think one thing that's changed probably dramatically since the sort of mid to late 80s when Gary Stevens was right back compared to now, I think the right back then is entirely different to what a right back is now. So when you've got a James Tavernier who, I mean, GS comments on how Tav struggles to defend. I'm not sure I agree with that, but he defends certainly in a different way for what Gary Stevens defended. Gary Stevens wasn't particularly interested in, I don't want to say scoring goals, that doesn't sound right. He was aware that probably wasn't the primary part of his game. I think with Tav, one of his main strengths is how offensive he is and how attacking he can be up and down that right hand side. Stevens was that as well. You know what I mean? Stevens was a naturally gifted defender, wonderful right back. And I've got to be honest, I don't think Tav is too far away, to be perfectly honest with you. But I've said before, and I've said it in this famous WhatsApp chat that we speak about, James Tavernier as a captain will ultimately be judged on the amount of medals he leaves Glasgow with one day. And at the moment, the reality is he doesn't have enough, and he will have to seriously stock up in winners' medals between now and whenever that time is, when he eventually moves on. It's a fantastic, fascinating debate, and I still can't believe, for what it's worth, that Saf is late 40s.
Absolutely, yeah.
So listen, guys, we should say tonight we've heard a lot about Edmiston House recently, and tonight is the opening gala of it. So they're really going they're going out on one tonight. All the sort of who's of Rangers is there tonight, and they will indeed induct 3 new members of the Hall of Fame. Last time we done this was 2014, Saf, and we inducted, if you like, Lee McCulloch, Nacho Novo, and the late Fernando Rickson. Yeah. It's getting to the stage where we need to think about who's going to be in next. I believe that the official Twitter have announced tonight there will be 3 people inducted into that. I think that Alan McGregor and Stephen Davis should be 2 of the 3 without a doubt. Andrew Finlayson agrees. That Davo and Griggs are certs. They're probably the most decorated Rangers of the 21st century. To be in the Hall, I like it. You need to be involved in more than one league winning side, which I think is absolutely right. Saf, where are you on who should be in there? And I assume you agree that Stephen Davis and Alan McGregor should be.
Yeah, I presume there's been no announcement yet, Scott.
Not that I've seen. You will have seen me checking my phone back and forward. I am looking for that.
I don't want to preempt or discredit myself by saying something. I agree with what you're saying. The only thing I would say about McGregor is I think it's a shame that he didn't actually retire when we all thought he would last summer. You know, that Scottish Cup final ending. And he kind of, I just feel that this year he's kind of, my view is well known that he's kind of let himself down by just going an extra year. And that's not his fault. That's management as well, not focusing on the goalkeeping situation. But McGregor, certainly Europe, domestic, has been exceptional for Rangers, and I wouldn't disagree with that, and I wouldn't disagree with Davis either. And as I said, I wouldn't disagree with Tav being amongst the trio, assuming they're going to still have players that are currently actively playing for Rangers in there. I think it'd be a proud moment for Tav to do that, to be there as well.
Adam, I mean, as I say, I mean, I do think McGregor and Stephen Davis should be absolute shoo-ins. Paul McGarrigle, hi Paul, thanks for tuning in, mentions Lee Wallace, which I think is a fantastic shout. Sacrificed loads since 2012, including, I would argue, an international career. At that point, he was probably the best left back in the country, and would have been the national left back for many a year. And really sacrificed that to go down to the 3rd division with the club. Where do you stand on who maybe the 3 should be, and is Lee Wallace sort of worthy of being involved there?
Yeah, so I think Davis and McGregor 100%. I'm slightly that it's a strange one with McGregor with this kind of extra year, but also in complete agreement that I think you have to be stronger at a management level. And footballers have big egos. They believe they're always going to believe. It's the same with managers. They just, how often do you see them go out really on their own terms? It takes a manager or someone strong to just say, no, this, I'm afraid you can't kind of take this any further. But when you kind of take him in, isolation and what he's achieved with the club, I think he has to be in there. It's the exact same with Stephen Davis. I think the fact as well, it's interesting, they've both kind of come full circle, and from a playing point of view, Stephen Davis is just outstanding. It was funny, before we came on this, I had a look at his Southampton career, and the amount of managers like Maurizio Pochettino, Ronald Koeman, the guys, really top managers that rated him was quite fantastic to see, and well deserved. So coming on to Lee Wallace, I think definitely an interesting shout in terms of his kind of service to the club, and as you say, Scott, I think that's a perfectly fair statement to say that he was probably the best left back in the country, and therefore arguably sacrificed his international career. I suppose the kind of other side of the coin is folk maybe ask, he was not playing at the same, he wasn't going through Europe the way Tavernier was, etc., etc. So it depends just kind of how you sort of look at what should get a player into the Hall of Fame. And I know there is, is there sort of 5 points or something that if you've maybe got them, I don't know. So
yeah, I've got them here. So the 5, we should say if you're perhaps a bit unsure about the Hall of Fame and how it started, it was set up in 1999 by Mr. John Gregg. Good evening, sir. Sandy Jardine, David Mason, the club historian, and one Sir David Murray. And the 5 sort of, not necessarily bullet points, and I loathe to say criteria because that sounds like it's a bar you need to get, and I don't think it applies to everyone, to be honest. Service to the club, number of games played for the club, medals won with the club. I can't read my writing there. International caps whilst at the club, and lastly, ability, and I would suggest that means maybe just what you do for the club as far as a sort of ability is concerned, Adam. So
I think international caps is incredibly harsh on James Tavernier, given he's been born in a generation that's produced sort of 4 of the best right backs.
100%, absolutely. And that's where it becomes where it becomes really. And same goes for Lee Wallace. I think it does become really hard at that point to throw Lee Wallace's name into the equation, because he sacrificed so much to go down and play against sort of bookers, bookies, bakers, candlestick makers, the lot. Do you know what I mean? Guys that were going out to work on a Saturday night. So I almost think it is unfair to have that as a criteria to try and get in. John Wallace throws in a name from yesteryear, Jim Forrest. Incredible that Jim Forrest isn't in there already, as far as I'm concerned, when you look at some of the guys that are in there. More recently, Novo, McCulloch. Saf, is there anyone off the top of your head who you think sort of should be in there? We know that sort of all the guys from the 90s and the successful early 2000s is in there. Amoruso, Alberts is in there. Barry Ferguson, rightly so, is in there. Is there anyone there that you think, goodness me, he should absolutely be in there?
I can't think of anybody. I had a look earlier on today and over the weekend. I think Gascoigne's in there, I presume.
He's in there, absolutely, yeah.
And Richard Goff's in there. Certainly the people that I can remember that have been genuine leaders and stars and standouts of that generation are there. I can't really recall anybody I think that should be beyond the ones that I just said. Of the current generation, does Goldson? Not really. He's not really been there long enough, albeit he's had that exceptional season in terms of defending 55. I can't really think of anybody that I think, gosh, they'll stand
it's really difficult.
That we already discussed.
Sakala in there, just out of curiosity.
Did you say Fashion Sakala?
Yeah, is he in there? No, is he?
Goodness me, how do you cut people off this feed? Do you know? I think one of the things we have done, joking aside, is I think we have made it. It's very, very difficult to pick guys from recent times that would deserve to be in there. Don't forget, my understanding is the Hall of Fame's primarily based on players, so it can't be based on players that haven't sort of ran out on the turf. So you almost, while there should be something for Walter Smith, my goodness, should there be something for Walter Smith? It's incredible that there's not yet, even in and around the stadium. Jimmy Bell, I see my previous answer, there has to be something for them in there. And listen, I have to say, right on cue, the gaffer jumps in on This Is Ibrox chat, Tommy McIntyre. Hi, Tommy, good evening. If non-football managers and players are going in, then David Holmes deserves a seat. So, David Holmes, Saf, your memories of David Holmes, of course, responsible for bringing Graham Souness to the club in 86.
Yeah.
If anyone is going to be in there, and we're talking about players that, we're talking about people that have been involved passionately and really invest in the club, David Holmes is absolutely right up there.
Yeah, if you think about it, for the young generation that maybe don't know, David Holmes changed Rangers that you can't even believe. It's one of these things where you kind of know where you were when Souness signed and when Mo Johnson signed, and Souness was predominant in that. David Holmes was prominent in signing Souness as the player manager. He was part of the Lawrence Group that owned Rangers at the time, the house building magnate, and it was he and his team that decided enough was enough. Rangers were a sleeping giant. We weren't going to be overrun by Aberdeen and United and Celtic to some extent. Then we had low attendances and so on, and just changed Rangers. Sea change. It's a bit like one can argue, all this Arab money coming into some of these football clubs now in Europe or even the English league. It was absolutely sea change. And as I said, it was that dominant. And I agree with Tommy. You actually remember where you were when it was announced. It was that you actually remember when, as I said, when Souness was announced, or as subsequently other things were announced. So I agree with Tommy. He certainly deserves something. And yeah, Walter, I don't know what's happening with the statue or whatever Rangers will be doing for Walter as well. These guys generally deserve recognition because they changed the face of Rangers and the face of Scottish football by very, very small but massive actions at the time.
Yeah, and listen, I think as well, when you get really deep into it about guys that maybe haven't played for the club, you of course drift all the way back to when Shug was a boy and Bill Struth was around, and I think moving forward, you look at Willie Waddle completely revolutionised the game that we all go to football up and down the country, completely changed everything we do. So I think when the minute you start talking about involving maybe guys that have not played for the club, there's a big debate there as well, because we've got a lot of custodians of the football club who deserve to have their own little piece of history there. Listen, it's getting close to time for you guys to disappear. Saf, I've really enjoyed having on. Thanks very much.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me. It was a good discussion, and as I said, all roads lead to next Sunday.
And indeed they do. I can't wait. I'm excited already. This time next week, I'm hopeful. In fact, this week, next week, regardless, I will be a little bit hoarse. Adam, it's always good to see you on again, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, Scott, and just to echo everything that was said there. Hopefully everyone's in a good mood this time next Sunday.
Indeed, or next Sunday will be an absolute nightmare. I'm sure it won't be, and of course we hope it won't. Listen, before we let everyone disappear into their Sunday night, a couple of things I want to bring to your attention. We should say that Kai Watson, who is one of our master scribblers, has pulled together a fantastic series that corroborates and ties in with the Blue Heaven series that was on the telly about 20 or so years ago, to be honest with you. It's went live tonight across on our website. It's all the W's, thisisibrox.wixsite.com. Jump on and have a look. First person he managed to get some time with was Peter Leven, who got a really nasty injury during his time when Blue Heaven was on. Jump on, have a look. You will familiarise yourself with much of the content on there. I recommend you jump on if you can. I should say before we go, congratulations to Livingston yesterday, and indeed the representatives of Rangers who were involved in the selection of the mascots yesterday. The mascot at the Livingston game yesterday was a young lad called Leighton. I don't know his surname. I apologise for that. However, he is an autistic little fella, and they treated him really, really well yesterday. I have to say, full fair play to David Martindale and all the people at Livingston for really making that a special occasion for the wee guy. Nicky Devlin, of course, the Livingston captain, came out with a pair of headphones on, which I think really struck a chord with a lot of the fans. I'm sure for his family, it was quite an emotional day and really good to see. So congratulations to everyone at Livingston for facilitating that, and everyone at Rangers who, of course, would have been involved in helping that go on. Really good, and a good news story for Scottish football. Again, it's good to speak about the good things that happen in the game here. Chelsea's worst player. Should say tomorrow 6:30 early start. Craig Dennett is joined by Kai Watson and Scott Cameron. Join them if you can. Have a good week. Bye bye.